Well, let me show you a couple of things on how to look into the Woozle effect in the state of climate science. One way is to see how the footnotes, remember the Woozle effect is faulty footnotes, that is shabby citation. One way is to see how the citation relates to the text, which it supports. In this example here, the text, the first sentence, talks about hysteria in the Obama administration's energy department has basically permeated the entire government. So we look at the example of that. Footnote number 1, if you click on it here, there's a hypertext link which puts you to this article I have on the next page. If you want to return to where you were reading, just click on the 1 and that'll put you back to where you were. But the footnote used to support this charge of hysteria is anything but hysterical. It's an 11-year-old recommendation by the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, which basically oversees all of the companies that are traded on the stock exchange. And it's a recommendation by the Securities and Exchange Commission that companies should have a statement about their carbon profile, because investors will likely want to know. As in time, there will be more legislation and perhaps costly public policies related to carbon. And so it's basically saying, let your investors know what your carbon footprint is. It's not required, but it's a recommendation. So that's the support for hysteria. A common sense statement, recommendation by the Securities and Exchange Commission. So that's one way the footnotes are garbage, is that they really have nothing to do with the text they're supposed to reinforce. The next way that the sources are shabby is that they cite people who have no legitimacy as scientists. And so you have, this is Richard Lindzen, I think, is the one who is, he's a mathematician, he's very, very well educated, but he is not a respected climatologist. And as you cruise on down, you'll find out that he's with the fossil fuel funded Cato Institute, and he's also done a lot of work with the Heartland Institute, the Global Warming Policy Foundation. All of these are climate denial front groups. So the person they cite here to give legitimacy to their argument is actually somebody who doesn't have a reputation worth looking at in the field of climatology. Similarly, they cite David Ligatti's frequently in the article. And I guess I don't have to find the reference to his name. It's somewhere in this first paragraph here. But the thing about David Ligatti's, here he is, okay. And again, just Google his name. Excuse me, David Ligatti's climate denial. You find that he actually is really well credentialed, though he has been pushed out of several posts because of his contrarian beliefs on climate. He also, naturally, is somebody Trump brought into the White House for his commission on climate because he's a climate denialist. But again, here's somebody who's a total outlier, who's not really respected in the climate science community and has not really made any significant publications on climate science, that is, research-based observation on climate. And so, again, he's not a strong source, but you wouldn't know that unless you looked into the footnotes and looked into his reputation. And then let me do a short digression here as we come into the end of the class with the last paper. This is kind of a good graphic. It's called Inside Climate News. You can't see all of that because the top cuts out. But this is what you have. It's kind of a historic stream of climate denial. And you have think tanks, the Heritage Foundation, that's one we're looking at. You have contrarian scientists, many of whom are going to be found in the footnotes. And then you have politicians, the Heartland Institute, but also people speaking, as we learned in the last week, Luntz's arguments on climate change. So what we're looking at here is the end product of a disinformation campaign on climate change that is largely funded by the fossil fuel industry. It's polished, it has tons of footnotes, the level of writing is really quite high and sophisticated, and it's entirely fraudulent, almost down to every single claim. So it's a remarkably polished work. And again, let me go back to the beginning of this. What I want you to do in this exercise is examine the footnotes. See if they either support the text, and then also check the credibility of the people cited. David Legate's Climate Denial. Look at some of the things on him. Richard Linsden, I can go back one, Climate Denial. Look at some of the things on him. Open up. And you'll find that virtually all of their sources are not good sources. So that, to return to where I started, is what the Woozle is about. Fraudulent citation, it's either irrelevant or they're just simply not legitimate people. And then keep in mind how it works. If somebody reads through this, they're going to say, God, look at all those footnotes. These guys are cooking with gas. Look at this. My God, they've done their research. Or if you wanted to, you could go all the way to the end page and really look at all those footnotes and say, wow, this is a legitimate document. But I'm sure you understand as well as I do that nobody in the world ever reads the footnotes. You only do that if you want to become an agnotologist, if you want to research what fraudulent information looks like, how it gets started. And so again, for this assignment, I just want you to examine the footnotes in the section you're assigned. I hope this clarifies why you're doing it and how to do it.